All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are just moments away from another, big night here at News Radio 1020, KDK, Election 16, the Pennsylvania primary, and I'm honored to have a political and polling expert. He is Doug Saltzman. We've got so much to get to, but let's begin with the big ticket item. That's the race for the presidency. And of course, on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State and Senator and First Lady, against the Senator from Vermont, the upstart Bernie Sanders.
Not bad for an upstart. He's been in Congress a long time, but he is an upstart. That's what's unusual about this Sanders campaign. Most people in America probably never heard of him until the race went, and nobody thought he'd had much of a chance. But I tell you, he has befounded a lot of people, including folks like myself, analysts who thought he had no prayer, and he's made quite an impact on this campaign.
You know, there is a makeshift sign hanging off the bridge at the Green Tree exit of 376, and it's a bunch of painted dollar signs versus Bernie Sanders. Is that really a fair statement? I mean, they've all spent millions of dollars.
Yeah, and Bernie has raised a ton of it. He may have raised it in little chunks along the way, but he has raised millions and millions and millions. I mean, the days of campaigns having to mail something to somebody to get a check in the mail back are gone. It's all on the internet. You can make instant donations, and Bernie has done the best of it. He had good appearances at debates, and suddenly he'll raise $10 million. It really is amazing that he keeps going and going and going, despite the fact that he's basically mathematically eliminated on the delegate count.
Listen, a lot of delegates up for grab on the Democratic side. The Republican side, not such the case. We'll get to that in a moment. But Hillary Clinton seems to be the friendly face of labor, and that's a good thing in these parts, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they don't represent as many people as they used to, naturally, but they still have a great deal of influence. And Hillary has been very good at bringing those supporters on her side. And they not only do they endorse her, then they turn out to vote for her, work the polls.
The developer that is Donald Trump, he has a lot of money, but in comparison, he hasn't spent a lot of money, and he is the front runner. Many people believe when they get together in Cleveland, he will be the nominee on the Republican Party side.
I would be very surprised if he wasn't. I mean, anytime there's been an altered delegation or a convention that's been brokered, it's not gone well for the candidate, regardless of what party they happen to be in, Democrat or Republican.
You know, Ted Cruz and John Kasich have formed this alliance. You know, Indiana's up next on Tuesday, May 3rd, and they're kind of going to opposite ends of the state, not to count each other out, basically, the vote. And it's all about making sure that Trump doesn't get that vote. I've never heard of anything like that in my life.
Well, I guess they could be on the next season of Survivor. I mean, they're doing these alliances. I mean, it has happened, but candidates are never so blunt about it.
Why are they so afraid of Donald Trump? What are they so afraid of, the Republican Party?
And I guess neither one of them at this point want to be vice president, because this is not a way to endear yourself
Doug,
to the front runner.
You've been around politics a long time. The phone rings, the bat phone rings, and it's Trump. You think either one of them are going to turn that down?
George H.W. Bush called Reaganomics, voodoo economics, and he was a very, very loyal vice president for 8 years, and then ran on the Reagan legacy and won his own 4 years in office.
All right, and I know Trump's going to win in Pennsylvania. I believe he'll win in Pennsylvania, but you've got Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, and Rhode Island. Any thoughts about those other states and how they go?
Well, this is the big one. I think Hillary in the other four states, as well as Pennsylvania, is going to win overwhelmingly. I mean, could really be the final nail in the coffin for Bernie Sanders' campaign. That doesn't mean he's going to stop campaigning.
I never heard of such a thing. Don't you have a job you got to go to, somebody?
Yeah, well, he's getting paid no matter what. He's a U.S. senator. You can keep getting paid and not show up for work.
Okay,
it's
all right.
Job.
Now let's take a look at. I'm just thinking about this U.S. Senate race. Toomey barely beat Sestak last time out. Sestak was the leader up until all of a sudden everyone has been supporting and endorsing Katie McGinty, and I think she's probably going to win this thing. But if Trump would win, could that actually help Toomey's chances, you think, in the fall?
I think it would. I mean, anytime the top of the ticket does better, you're going to do better. I'm going to disagree with you on I think Sestak's going to pull this one out. I really
Either
do.
one will be good.
Yeah, it's if anything, if it's a very, very close race, KT's going to be awfully upset with John Fetterman, who I think is drawing off votes from her. He's not drawing off votes from Sestak. And it's an unusual thing that the party decided to do this, the establishment in the party. I mean, he almost beat, just 6 years ago, he almost beat the incumbent Pat Toomey, and now the entire party establishment, up to the President of the United States, is supporting Katie McGinty, who, when she ran for governor a couple of years ago, got clobbered.
All right, now to the AG race. Democrats, Morganelli, Shapiro, Zappala.
It's an interesting one there as well. And Zappala, of course, from our hometown. Great DA. He's done a nice job here, well liked.
But can the West be enough to beat that machine that is the East?
Yeah, I don't think it can be. Shapiro has a lot of support out in that area, a lot of support by the strong Democrats who have to state the governor himself. So if I were to guess right now, I would say Shapiro is going to win this primary tonight. And it's a close one. It's a close one. There's another candidate running, sort of an also-ran. He could draw some votes away from Shapiro, but I think ultimately he's campaigned better than Sapella has. Sapella's not used to this level of campaigning. He's won election after election out here. This is different than when you're running statewide.
So happy to have Doug Saltzman with me. We're going to be on the air from 8 to 11. More on that in a moment. But the Republicans, John Rafferty and Joe Peters, what do you think?
Yeah, the Peters thing is interesting. I mean, he was a staffer to the troubled, the beleaguered, I don't know what other word you can call Kathleen Kane. He was one of her top deputies, her communications director at one point. He's a Republican, but it was a dream come true for Rafferty to be able to say he worked in the office of Kathleen Kane. I don't think they had to hire a consultant to help him with those commercials. So I would have to think Rafferty would have to win this one, just based on the fact that do Republicans want to elect someone who was on the staff of Kathleen Kane?
All right, a lot of legislative seats out there, but there's some congressional seats out there as well. And that kind of interests a lot of people out there as it does me. What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, these are seats that have Democratic majorities out here, but Republican representatives. Tim Murphy doesn't even have an opponent in the fall coming up. Bill Schuster represents areas well within our listening area. He doesn't have a Democrat opponent, but he has a Republican opponent, saying that he's not conservative enough. So his opponent's been attacking him on the airways, not being conservative enough. Bill Schuster's running ads saying how conservative he is.
And the congressman from my district happens to be celebrating a birthday today, so happy birthday to Congressman Keith Rothman. In closing, Pennsylvania, can you actually say it matters this time around?
It does matter this time around. It really does, which is terrific. It's always been a shame over the years. They've tried to move up the primary earlier in the year, especially for a presidential year. Harry Reedshaw, state representative from Carrick, has pushed that over the years, has not been successful. Incumbents don't like early primaries because it gives their opponents a lot more time to get ready for the November election, and that's probably why it's at least it's in April. Of course, primaries in non-presidential years are in May.
You got to give me one good war story. You know, I was a huge fan of Arlen Specter, who you work for. Had a chance to interview him at the old KDK One Gateway Center. What was it like on a primary election day or an election day with the great Arlen Specter?
Well, primaries were always very interesting. Of course, the Republicans were never thrilled with Arlen. A lot of them would purposely not vote or vote for somebody else just to prove a point against them. Primaries are always very interesting for Arlen Specter. Sadly, in the last election, of course, he switched parties.
Right.
And because he had no chance of winning in the Republican primary, the polling showed it that year. He was down around 30%. And so he switched to Democrat and Joe Sestak, despite being almost told by the White House, get out of this race so Specter can win. Didn't. And, of course, he beat Specter. And it was sort of a sad way for his career to end. But, yeah, the war stories are long. And, I mean, I never saw anybody, despite his incredible health problems over the years, just kept going and going and going. Nobody could out-campaign. The closest I've seen now in this era is Joe Sestak. He is just a non-stop campaigner.
Well, being he was a 3-star admiral, Mr. Sestak understands discipline and knowing how to handle things. But I got to believe he had a lot of jumbo sandwiches and some cold coffee on the campaign trail. Come on.
Yeah, it was. I think people thought Arlen Specter went from the Duquesne Club here in Pittsburgh to the Union Club in Philadelphia. I mean, we were eating sandwiches out of a cooler in the car. I'd pick them up in the morning and off we'd go with a carton of milk and a chipped ham sandwich.
I love it.
So it wasn't always all that glamorous, quite frankly.
Well, here's what we're going to do tonight. He and I together anchoring until 11. We have got Joe DeStio at the anchor desk locally here. We've got CBS Radio News taking a look at the presidential race. We've got Jim Garrity and Maria Gabriel out in the field tonight. John Delano and Bill Green, former Congresswoman Melissa Hart, plus business trends with Heffron Tillotson, senior research analyst, election news and Wall Street. How they do go hand in hand, Brian Coble. Join us tonight. It is Election 16, the Pennsylvania primary on KDKA.